The last passenger. The highway was almost empty. Light rain fell from the dark sky as an old bus moved through the night. Daniel, the driver, had been driving this route for 12 years. He knew every turn of the road and every building along the way. It was 11:48 p.m., and he was only 20 miles away from home. There were only 3 passengers left on the bus. An old woman slept near the front. A young man sat by the window with headphones on. A businessman quietly read a newspaper. A road sign appeared ahead. Blackwood, 2 miles. Daniel hated Blackwood. Strange stories had always surrounded that place. People said the forest near Blackwood was haunted and that travelers sometimes saw figures standing among the trees at midnight. A few minutes later, the bus reached the lonely bus stop. There were no houses nearby and no other vehicles on the road. Then a thick fog slowly rolled across the highway. Daniel frowned. Suddenly, a person appeared in the mist. He was a tall man wearing a black coat and carrying an old brown suitcase. He walked toward the bus with slow, steady steps. Daniel opened the door. The stranger stepped inside without saying a word. His face was unusually pale. He looked around once, then walked to the last row and sat in the final seat. Daniel watched him through the rearview mirror and felt a strange chill run through his body. The bus moved again. Rain began falling harder. A few minutes later, Daniel looked into the mirror. The man was staring directly at him. He did not blink. Daniel looked back at the road. A few seconds later, he checked the mirror again. The man was still staring. Suddenly, the lights inside the bus flickered. The old woman woke up and looked around nervously. The young man removed his headphones. The businessman lowered his newspaper. Outside, the forest had become completely silent. Then the lights went out. For 1 second, the bus disappeared into darkness. The lights returned. The old woman was gone. Her seat was empty. Daniel's heart nearly stopped. The young man stood up. "Where did she go?" he asked. Nobody answered. Only the stranger in the last seat remained calm. Daniel looked into the mirror. The man was still staring at him. Then he spoke for the first time. "Keep driving." His voice was low and cold. Daniel gripped the steering wheel tighter. Rain pounded against the windows. The young man looked outside and suddenly screamed. Figures were standing among the trees. There were dozens of them. They were perfectly still. The businessman looked outside and saw them too. Daniel pressed harder on the accelerator. The lights flickered again. For 1 second, darkness filled the bus. The lights returned. The young man was gone. Only the businessman remained. He was shaking with fear. Daniel could barely breathe. Then the stranger spoke again. "They are awake." "What are you talking about?" Daniel asked. The man did not answer. The businessman stood up. "I want to get off this bus," he shouted. The stranger slowly turned his head toward him. "No," he said quietly. "You cannot leave." The businessman backed away. The lights went out once more. Darkness. Silence. Then the lights returned. The businessman had disappeared. Every passenger was gone. Only Daniel and the stranger remained. Daniel's hands trembled. The forest outside seemed endless. The strange figures were still standing among the trees. Then something happened. One of the figures moved. Then another. Then another. They all began walking toward the road. Daniel's breathing became heavy. The stranger looked outside. "They have been waiting for us." "Who are they?" Daniel asked. The man finally looked at him. "They are passengers." "What passengers?" The man remained silent for several seconds. Then he said, 30 years ago, a bus crashed on this road." Daniel looked at him through the mirror. It was raining, the man continued. The driver lost control. The bus went through the guardrail and fell into the ravine. Daniel swallowed. No one survived. Silence filled the bus. The man lowered his eyes. "I was there." Daniel froze. "What do you mean?" The stranger looked directly into the mirror. "I was one of the passengers." A cold chill passed through Daniel's body. Outside, the figures were getting closer. "We all died that night," the man said. The bus suddenly slowed. Daniel looked ahead. They had reached the old crash site. A broken guardrail stood beside the road. Below it, hidden among the trees, was the rusted frame of an old bus. Daniel's blood turned cold. The stranger slowly stood up. Outside, dozens of shadowy figures emerged from the fog. They surrounded the bus. Their faces were pale. Their eyes were dark. They simply stood there, watching, waiting. Daniel tried to restart the engine. Nothing happened. Again, nothing. Panic filled his chest. The stranger walked toward the front. The spirits outside slowly moved closer. Then he placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. For the first time, there was sadness in his eyes. "I've been taking them home for 30 years, he said softly. Daniel stared at him. "We return every year on this night." The stranger looked at the spirits outside. "They cannot leave until someone guides them." He slowly opened the bus door. Cold fog entered the bus. Every shadow turned toward him. Without another word, he stepped outside. Then he began walking into the darkness. One by one, the spirits followed him. No one spoke. No one looked back. The fog slowly swallowed them. Within seconds, they were gone. The forest became completely silent. Then the engine started by itself. Daniel sat there, unable to move. Finally, as the first light of dawn appeared on the horizon, he drove away. When he reached the city, he looked into the rearview mirror. The last seat was empty, but something rested there. The old brown suitcase. Daniel stopped the bus. His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside was a photograph. It showed an old bus and several smiling passengers standing beside it. Among them was the man in the black coat. On the back of the photograph was a date. October 13th, 1996. Below it, 3 words were written. "I was the last passenger." Daniel looked up. For a moment, he saw the man's reflection sitting in the last seat. The reflection smiled. Then it disappeared. Daniel never drove the Blackwood route again. But every year, on October 13th, he leaves a single flower at the old crash site. Because deep inside, he knows one thing is true. Some passengers never reach their destination.